We are currently living through a time that has instilled a lot of fear in people. From the pandemic to the Ukraine Russia conflict and the resulting inflation, it's a scary time to be alive. Recently, I've noticed that so many conversations are revolving around the topic of fear, and I wanted to speak with someone who can share some tools with us on how to release the fear and instead live in a place of peace. Award winning author and spiritual success coach Joanna Garzilli is my guest today. Joanna, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to sit down with me. But I did think it was a really important conversation that we needed to have.
I'm so grateful to be with you, Natalie, and I appreciate everything, your energy, your spirit, the work that you do. And it's an honor for me to be with you today. And I'm excited because I just know there's going to be some great aha moments for us as where two or more are gathered.
So I film a show every week on the High Vibe Network called Full Disclosure with David Palmer, the Leo King. And you and I in the background have been chatting for some time, talking about sitting down and having a chat. And I could not figure out what the direction of the discussion was going to be. And it was a couple of weeks ago, I was driving home and I recognized that so many of my conversations at the moment are revolving around fear. And I was curious as to whether you've noticed an uptick in fear in the collective.
100%. I mean, it's more than 100%. It's beyond that. Back in, when was it? I think around later in 2019, I had sat down to tune in for myself. I like to get quiet and go, what lies ahead for me in the next few months? I got this, I suppose one could call it an intuitive, a download that said we've got World War III coming, but not as we know it. It's going to be more of a war that's coming on the streets. This is just different. It's just not like in the past. Let me just say there is a silver lining to everything. I do see good things further ahead, and we can talk about that afterwards, about the positive things. So I'm not going to go all doom and gloom here, but I just want to just talk about the past and how, and then what happened with the present before we get to the future. So I was really shocked because I thought, I want to get some insights of how to help people next. And it really floored me. I called my dear friend Anne Cates, who's also a fellow author and who you would get on amazingly with. And I just got this insight, and it's really freaking me out. And what followed from that was I received additional insights that we would move into a period more of the quickening. And that was something that I had a strong sense of going back to 1998, many, many, many years ago, when I was visiting these pyramids in Egypt, in Giza. And so from there, I guess during the pandemic, I ended up doing all this sort of these meditations and teaching on how to handle the quickening. And I think I thought it was going to come to an end, but it hasn't. Everything just keeps moving faster and faster, and I see that yes, it is making people. For some people, they are going crazy. They are experiencing high anxiety, stress, not being able to think clearly, and I'm seeing it happen from people from all walks of life, all socioeconomic backgrounds, right? All different from who maybe don't have large amounts of money to people who are extremely rich with a lot of money. Everyone is collectively experiencing a similar type of thing. And I feel part of this, Natalie, is because we are moving into really the age of light. I feel like that quickening is the age of light. It's also manifesting through the digital age, and hence how I guess partly how I ended up in doing stuff in cryptocurrency and getting really involved in that. because I see this whole space of the metaverse really as an extension of expressing ourselves as multidimensional beings. So there's a lot of different pieces to this. And that I could say a lot more, but I'll stop there a moment and let you ask what you maybe want to ask next.
When the collective is becoming more fearful versus being in a place of peace or love and light, how we often sort of talk about, how does that affect sort of the rest of the world and the outside parts of us, if that makes sense?
It makes sense, absolutely. What pops into my mind, I go back to when I had my deeper spiritual awakening in my early 20s. And one of the key things that I learned was that part of collective spiritual growth is that there are very polarized viewpoints, very polarized experiences, where we end up being reflections of each other, of whatever we see around us. And something that I have noticed from people who consider themselves spiritually awake to people who are really asleep, that, how do I want to say it? It's like if someone looks at someone and sees them in a negative way or they're wrong, no matter what their thing is, whether it's political, whether it's medical, whether it's around food, around relationships, core values, whatever the thing is, that we as human beings, I think what we've done, or the sort of the disconnect, is that we see that other person totally as wrong, or that other group as wrong. We see them as the problem. And all I can say from my experience and how I have handled moving through fear is, as soon as when I start to feel very, oh, I don't like that, and I feel angry or I feel frustrated that that other person or that group doesn't see things how I see things, I know I need to take a step back. I need to look directly around me. I look around me in my environment, in my space, and then I just focus on, who can I help now? Normally it starts with helping myself first. Just getting quiet with there, getting to a place of just of calm, of gratitude. And then from there, once I feel the energy settled and I don't feel that reaction to, I don't like how this thing's being handled, again, by whether it's government or whatever else, the things beyond my control. And then I'm able to just get on with things. I mean, that's how I handle it. But I think part of this polarization that has really been happening throughout history, if we go all the way back through history, it is taking, we are growing. So I feel that the stage that we're in right now in 2022, fast forward in time, instinctively, I feel like once we hit between sort of around 2024 to 2030, it's hard to be specific with time, that we're going to move into a more peaceful, more harmonious time globally. But it is going to get worse before it gets better, because we're flushing out a lot of stuff. And some people embrace spiritual growth. And as we're moving into this quickening, some people can embrace fear and understand that fear is our teacher. And for others, they're going to want to stick their head in the sand. And for others, they're going to just be in total denial and blame. So there's these different things that fear triggers. But I do believe that fear, ultimately, what we're experiencing collectively, will move us towards a better place. And I don't believe we're going to blow up this whole world. Again, I go back to what I said about the sort of the World War III, but not as we know it. We're going to come out of the other side more evolved, stronger, more graceful, collectively.
Certainly on High Vibe, we've been talking about the prospect of World War III and all the things surrounding that. And we have been sort of in agreement, I guess, with all the different people that are part of the network, that World War III has already started and it's a spiritual war. And when I was writing my notes and sort of putting my thoughts together for our conversation, I started thinking back and I started contemplating social media, because obviously I go to social media for a lot of my research to see what people are posting and talking about, and what those conversations are. And I realized that FOMO was a thing, 10 years ago, and where, fear of missing out. And I almost feel like this attack on our spirituality and people living in fear started back there, because it's, we're watching people's living, or watching people rather, living their best lives through social media. But we know, we've been told time and time again that so much of it is a facade and it's not real. It's one portion of their life, but it's not the reality. They're not showing the dark moments because people don't want to see that. And it instills this fear of, I don't have what they have. I'm not good enough. I'm having these dark, terrible moments, and they're out there living this incredible life, and I'm not achieving that. So therefore, I am a failure. Would you agree that this sort of attack on our spirituality and this installation of fear into the human consciousness started some time ago? FOMO probably wasn't the beginning of it, but that was sort of the first big thing that I noticed when I was looking back before these big conflicts around COVID, Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, all of that began.
Social media and internet, it's a way for us to connect more easily and more quickly. And yes, in that, it intensifies everything. And yes, there's everyone has a different, some people want to go and share all of themselves on social media. Some people want to see all of someone else to make themselves feel better that their life isn't as rubbish. For others, they don't want to see all of it. Uh, for some people, yes, it's putting out just the good stuff. Maybe it's, I've seen it with certain people, no names mentioned, who do all the red carpet stuff, or maybe have been very, very accomplished in their career as a public figure, but on a personal level,
Mhm.
maybe going through hell, going through debt, going through a very toxic relationship or marriage. And so, yeah, what is that right etiquette, so to speak, as to how much one does or doesn't share? I've just been watching recently The Gilded Age on HBO, and just going back to that time period of how things so in society that as a even when you're a young adult, it's no, you can't be in a relationship with this person. You're not going to marry down. You have to marry up. You can't be seen out in the street talking to this person. You're invited to this thing, but you're not. You're going to do this career and you can't do that. And this is something that has happened in like many different cultures and been strict throughout a period of time. Now I think it's like it's in a different way. Maybe we have more freedom, it seems, on the surface to choose, but there is this magnifying glass or this unspoken thing around social media that puts massive pressure and stress upon people. So I find for myself, I have periods of time where if I feel really good, centered, grounded, connected, and I have something valuable to share through social, I'll do it. And then other times I found, because of the intensity of everything in the past 2, 3 years, I have periods where I go dark on social and I'm not on there because it doesn't feel good to me. It just doesn't. But sometimes I have to force myself to get on there to connect. And then I do appreciate the connection with certain people. So it feels like a gift and a curse.
I have to agree about social media. So anyone that follows my Instagram, or even my interviews that I do, I don't post interviews just for the sake of posting interviews. I chase the people, and I say chase because I'm very insistent when I decide there's an interview I want to do. But I only film those interviews that resonate with me and that I feel can add value to the collective. My Instagram, several years ago, I used to post every day religiously because that's what you needed to do. And I think 2020, look, I probably got slack in 2019, but in 2020, I just went, it wasn't that I was in a bad place. I actually had a phenomenal 2020. I had a great 2021. I'm still doing really well in 2022, and I'm very grateful. And part of it is the tools that I've been given from incredible teachers in my life, incredible books, which we're going to talk about. But I just realized I didn't need to put stuff out for the sake of putting stuff out. So the posts that I put out, it's a similar sort of thing. I'm sitting there and something says, this is what I want to say today. And if it comes out that I post a photo once a month or I post a photo 2 days in a row, that's what it is. And I've also stopped worrying about what anybody else is doing because I'm running my own race. I'm not running anybody else's. So I completely agree. But that collective sort of conversation and just that term FOMO, I just went, oh, it's an interesting thing because it gets in your head.
Yeah, and I was very active in the past on social media, being consistent as an author, as a you know, feeling that also wanting to help people as a spiritual coach. It was like, okay, well, I need to get out there. I need to do something. There were times where I would, like when I did the quickening, I did something every week. I think it was for 12 weeks I did it in the past, where I taught, we did like 90 days in a row for creating a big miracle breakthrough. Whether I felt good or bad, I would show up no matter what. But I think that the big shift that's happened, and again, I don't talk about any of this stuff online, but I feel that there's this underlying energy of, again, it's not in sort of all levels, but persecution that is there, and a cruelty. And I can tell you from like when I started my doing crypto angel network on YouTube, and I haven't posted lately on that. I mean, I was doing videos every day, and then I had just taken a pause, and then I go back in now, but I was doing it consistently. But what I would notice is, so I would just share my own journey in crypto, and then crypto crowd can be quite outspoken, right? People, they get vicious. They get vicious. But I don't take it personally.
Hmm.
I think just people have got more and more mean online because they're just stressed in general overall. People are feeling a lot of pressure because some of how that fear is manifesting is through uncertainty for them. And then, like what you were saying with Ukraine and Russia, with say with China and Taiwan, these things, like, people don't know. I personally, I don't follow the mainstream news. If I look at it, I'll look at two polarized different points of view, totally different news networks. For me, I'm just about truth and justice. So I feel like there's a lack of that is allowed to be out there in the world at the moment.
I completely agree. I do the same thing. I go to all the news sources and I tend to sort of scan the headlines. When there's something interesting, I will read it. But I go to all of the big ones and then I go to the independents. And I know we're being told that the independents are not reliable sources of news. I disagree because I think there are a lot of incredible journalists who are fighting for truth and are down on the ground, and they're not beholden to advertisers or anybody externally. They are just sharing what they are seeing. And is that necessarily the whole story? No. But it's certainly, for me, a more truthful way to sort of come at things. And again, I was always taught there's always three sides to every story: their side, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I feel
Yes.
that for a lot of the news. So just before we get to tools that people can sort of implement in their lives to try and release the fear, we also, so you've just touched on China China and Taiwan, Russia and Ukraine. But in terms of COVID, there are so many layers of fear with this, and the mainstream media is responsible for a lot of it, because there's a lot of stuff that they reported on which has been proven to be untrue as we've moved further through this. But my observations of the people that I see around, you have people who are terrified of COVID, you have people who aren't. You've got people that, regardless of the mask mandates being lifted pretty much everywhere in the US, I mean, LA County has only just lifted them, those mandates a few days ago, but there are still people double, triple masking, terrified of anyone who's not wearing a mask. And none of this is about judgment, but we're seeing so much fear, and it's on so many different levels. And then we have the fear over the markets and bank accounts being frozen and all the financial matters. And then you add inflation into that. I had to fill up my car last night, $6 a gallon. I mean, that is
Yes.
crazy to me what I'm paying for gas. And so I think when there's fear, it's one thing. When you've got it so layered, because as people start to release the fear of this thing, they've got 10 other things sort of sitting somewhere in their bodies, whether it be their cells or their gut, and they're just hanging on to that. So what are some of the things that people can do to start releasing it? I know you talked about sort of centering yourself and looking at the things that you can control, but is there anything else that people can do to start trying to release it if these things are a little harder to let go of?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, let me just think about how I want to say this, because one of the things what you were just sharing there, when I started sharing more about my crypto journey, it was earlier around this time. I think around, was it, I have to check exactly. I think it was around April. I started April, May, really started to feel, I would hear different things about the markets and because of stuff geopolitically, and that hyperinflation would be coming. And my one of my family members has done a lot of stuff in the markets and is very, very accomplished and successful in it. And I would go and send through, I'd say, I think hyperinflation's coming, or I think this is this. And they say, absolutely not. There's no way that's going to happen. And here we are, we're talking about inflation, but really, I think that we haven't seen, like what you just said about the gas there in California, we are about to go towards a hyperinflation. I do think that that's coming, because people are like, oh, is it deflationary? All the different things that happen with that. With crypto markets, it's always, again, I just feel like that media, like I'm talking about mainstream media, is absolutely weaponized more than ever. I always remember studying in history from World War One about thinking about the propaganda machine, but now it's just so intense. So my point being is, whether it's stuff where you're seeing the sort of the polarization of whether people are really scared of COVID or they're not scared of it, whether people are saying, oh my gosh, we're gonna have the biggest crash ever, we're in a multiple assets bubble. And to me, the way I look at it is, there's some things I'm really scared of and some things I'm not. I can just say, for the markets, I feel like I like to zoom out. I mean, I take a step back and I look at a longer term thing, not investment advice, but I sort of like my picks and my investments. I'm just looking at, what do I feel comfortable holding that I feel good about in 10 years from now. And just to know that everything is very volatile right now. It's really, really intense. So I just for me, it's like just sort of mentally, I take a step back. I'll talk to different people, and then I always just come back to how, like when I'm pointing here, you can't see, but sort of like around the solar plexus area, not in the belly, but that upper part of the solar plexus, between the heart and the belly. Does this feel true for me? How do I feel about this? Like, I've had some people reach out to me where they're really scared because, like what you said, like what happened in Canada and the freezing of bank accounts, and then how crypto could become very dystopian as we move towards CBDCs. and what can happen with there. And I feel like, well, I'm not going to take all my stuff off the exchanges and go into cold storage. I'm not going to pull everything out of my bank account. I know it just depends on the circumstances of what country one's in and how maybe politically vocal or how much of an activist one is. So I suppose in some regard, I don't speak out on certain things and I don't take certain actions because I know that that could happen. But I like to fundamentally come back to, how do I move through this? I like to believe as much evil there is in the world, and there's some really evil people. Uh, there are also really good people out there as well. But that doesn't get covered in the news. We don't see all the people that are helping people on a daily basis that are doing wonderful charitable work, or just simple, just regular folk. It's all focused on these sort of bigger evil type characters. So I feel, despite everything, and I do believe we're going to go through some hell with Taiwan and all of this stuff, and everything's sort of going to get a bit worse before it gets better. It's always moved from one thing to the other, these narratives I see, these news stories, because I feel like now the propaganda machine in the past, where we have bombs drop on people, which I know is happening out in in Russia and Ukraine, but I feel like the propaganda now is like bombing inside people's minds. Like, how does one get, like, move beyond the fear? You have to realize when you're being mentally attacked, it's like you could say, you call it a psychic attack, sort of, almost. And well, how can that be real? How can someone attack you? But I feel like people are being attacked, like, literally through their psyche. And that is like, if one can be conscious enough and aware to go, hang on a moment, I don't want to tune into this frequency, because that's where I'm going to get really attacked. I'm going to get pummeled. How can I sort of get above those clouds, fly above it, and then cruise above that and get into that different place? Because there are many places in the world that are still peaceful, that are positive, with positive people and positive connections.
In the lead up to me realizing that we needed to have a conversation about fear, I have 2 of your 3 books that you've written. And you can't say, oh no, maybe you can, just how well loved the Unleash the Psychic in You is. And then I've got Big Miracles. I haven't read Scarlett's Confession, Tales of a British Psychic, yet, but I will get to it. So with Big Miracles, 11 Spiritual Rules for Ultimate Success, I had picked this up because in both books, you share a lot of yourself and your story, and you've lived what seems to be 100 lifetimes in this one. You've had all these different sort of chapters to your life, but through Big Miracles, there are so many exercises and tools that you give people. And the day I was going off to film the episode of Full Disclosure with David, I had picked the book up randomly and opened it to a page, whatever page wanted to sort of open to. And it was a section on fear. Then I go in and I film, and we have a conversation, and it was dominated by the fear that is in the collective. And that was when I came home and had my light bulb moment. And again, in this book, there are so many tools that people can use to release the fear and sort of take control back over their own lives. So I want to thank you for this book, because it really was so incredible. And as I was telling you before we started, another tool that you give in this book, not related to fear, but I think it kind of goes hand in hand, is the Box of Miracles, where we write down what we want to manifest. We're essentially writing a letter to spirit about what we want to manifest or what we want to release. And I read it and I thought, oh, I love that. Because there is a part of me that likes to communicate, and I will write emails to people to tell them how I'm feeling. I will send voice messages and do all these things. And we've named that part of me the Midnight Emailer or the Midnight Messenger. And people don't always like hearing from either of those two people, but the box of miracles has not only stopped my need to do that, because it allows me to take control of things, it allows me to release a lot of it. And even though it wasn't necessarily about fear, I thought that whole thing could be incredibly helpful in terms of asking spirit to help release you of that fear.
Yes, and when we make a request to spirit, sometimes it is answered quickly and sometimes slowly. There's times where I have not maintained my faith in the past because of my tendency in the past to be impatient. I'm getting more patient. And so I would doubt. And then the miracle would happen. Sometimes it would happen in a different way than what I was envisioning, because maybe, well, not maybe, because there was a something that would be better for me, for my life, and for my loved ones. I think a lot of the time what goes with fear, hand in hand, one of fear's best friends is resentment. And because resentment then creates a lot of shadows, perceptions, conceptions of what something really is, how someone thinks, the story that we can build up in our mind. And that starts on a personal level, could be with a family member, to a friend, to a coworker, to a boss if someone's working for someone, to our government leaders, to countries then having those perceptions. And I notice a lot. I have talked in Big Miracles about inner critic. It will just want to go off. 20 great things could happen, and I want to focus on the one negative thing. I want to focus, there's some type of delight or joy that I get from complaining, and my husband will laugh at this. He'd be like, complaints. But just being able to be aware of those things. But one of the biggest things I would say is, like, yeah, resentment is something that I know when I hear that voice rather than fear, it can then turn into fear. There's times where I've actually now I don't even say it aloud, or I'll hear it, or I'll write it down, and then I'll write an encouraging message to myself. And then I find a thing that I was then worrying about because of some crazy resentment that is from fear, it was unfounded. It's just like a paranoia. And I think that goes back to that sort of collective thing where collectively, globally, it has been amplified. So just being able to take that, but not to speak, like you were saying, not to speak the thing out loud, maybe just sort of let it pass, let the emotions settle. And then we find that it was fear just really taking a seat inside of us and trying to direct and create a crazy outcome, instead of just allowing that energy to run through, to let the emotions settle, and then take an action. A lot of times, one of the things that I will do is, when I feel that resentment or I feel a fear and I want to say something, and because I want to say something, then I don't want to do something, I do the opposite. I go, let me then just, even though I'm scared, even though I think this person doesn't like me, even though I think I'm going to lose this thing, I'm going to just take the action, and then I'm going to take another action, right? Those series of small action steps that add up to that big miracle. It's not just, I think, sometimes part of that manifestation process of, oh, I'm creating this thing, so let me be, part of it is taming, or being able to calm fear within one, and then taking those actions to move oneself forward.
There are two things I want to say to all of this. So the first one, why I was smiling the way I was when you were talking about inner critic, my inner critic, out of control. I can tell you everything that is wrong with me, from the way I look to the sound of my voice to how I conduct myself with certain people, all of this. And I used to tear myself up over it. I worked with an incredible therapist in Australia for 5 years through the worst and hardest years of my life. And she helped mold me into the person that I am today. And sadly, she passed away end of 2019. I was so saddened to hear of her passing. but I'm very grateful. There is an interview on my YouTube channel about her therapy, but it was about talking to these different parts of your personality. And that was when I discovered that not only did I have this inner critic, but that he was so far out of control. And so while you're talking about it, I'm recognizing that part of myself, because for me, the big miracle box, or the miracle box, has been a wonderful thing. But for me, I also have moments where I'm meditating and I have to have a conversation with my critic and say, you can't do this, and this is
Oh
why.
yeah.
And it's the only people I've ever had that conversation with are people that also had therapy with Ida, and so they didn't think I was absolutely crazy. So I love hearing somebody else talk about it, even if our approach is slightly different. The other thing that it brought up for me, through both of your books, you talk about, like I've already said, your very personal journey. But there are moments throughout that journey where you are very much, or you were, sorry, very much in fear, and yet you pushed through and you got to that next level, which is why you've lived so many lives in this life. But was there a fear that was triggered when you were sitting down to write about it?
At that point, when I wrote, for example, when I wrote Unleash the Psychic in You, I'd been teaching psychic development consistently for 10 years. And so those lessons, that was it was very integrated within me. And so when I wrote that, I ended up, like, when I finally got to write it, I wrote it very, very quickly, and it was very clear. With Big Miracles, I had been teaching those techniques with clients privately for a number of years, and taught workshops and done these 90 days of creating a big miracle breakthrough for 7 years before I then went and wrote that book. So before I wrote Big Miracles. And because at some point I've been thinking about doing a book on cryptocurrency, and I'll write stuff down, and that I'm not ready yet, because I feel like it has to live inside of me more. And so what I find is, it's sort of like each time I do a book, it's sort of like having a child. There's a period of gestation, of pregnancy that you go through, and a lot of the time it's a lot longer than 9 months. It's being able to, because it's not easy to birth a book. With Scarlett's Confession, with that's written as fiction, but it's based off of stuff that is sort of naughty from my own life, another life. It's more wild, more racy, and in that, there are those conversations with the different parts of the inner critic that who are written down in there, and it's funny because it's so ridiculous and painful and sabotaging, and somehow Scarlett comes out the other side of that.
I guess I was curious if it was scary writing about these moments in time where you were caught in that fear, or if it was almost therapeutic because you've already moved past it, because it is a very vulnerable thing to do, to share these stories.
Well, people are going to judge no matter what. And I used to be scared to a degree. And it's easy to be critical of someone that puts themselves out there publicly. And we know that more than ever through people who do stuff through YouTube, or, especially through social media, just to pick a person apart and criticize them. But so I think what would happen is I wouldn't be scared to share it. But it used to be like, I used to do a newsletter always that would go out, and so I would share, say, my insight or something from my life, and some people would come back and love it, and then I would sometimes have a person occasionally come back and tell me that I was a disgusting, terrible person, that I was trying to, for example, leverage or monopolize something bad that had happened in the world for my own personal gain, that I wasn't really spiritual. It's like, sometimes it'd be like, that person doesn't know, they don't even know me. Or they're just making a judgment. They don't know what my true intention is. So I would feel the energy of that, even sometimes, or sometimes maybe some people wouldn't write something nasty, but maybe they'd say it to someone else, or they just think it. And I'm very sensitive. I'm a hugely empathetic, very clairsentient, which is one of the chapters in Unleash the Psychic in You, and I would feel it. I would feel that negativity. So that would be hard. But what I've learned over a period of years, especially with when I started doing videos on crypto, was it doesn't matter. Like, just if I am aligned and I feel called to go and share that thing, and I am centered, grounded, and connected, what other people think of me, it's none of my business. It doesn't matter if 10 people don't like it, but maybe 100 people are going to like it, or only one person's going to like it. If it helps one person, then great. I can't please everyone. Not everyone's going to like me. And I'm going to just deal with that and live with that. And sometimes that feels scary and uncomfortable, but that is just how it is. I can't control what other people think of me.
I once read a quote, which I thought was so amazing. And it was, if you're sitting on the fence just so that everyone will like you, you stand for nothing. When you stand for what you truly believe in, no matter which side of the fence that is, somebody will always dislike you. And that made it a lot easier for me when people were coming at me. And I've also dealt with a lot of online bullying from being on reality TV, and you've worked in entertainment, you understand that whole industry. And having people come for you is an incredibly uncomfortable thing. But for me, one of the things that I did learn was people coming for me has nothing to do with me. And often these people that come for us don't even follow us. So they don't know. They've seen one post or something has happened and it's triggered them, but it's more about them than it is about us. So
I can share something positive on that. So there have been times where some people have come at me really hard online, and then I've just said, thank you for your feedback. And then that person, those people, when that's happened, they've actually softened. Or I've said, thank you for sharing your point of view. That's okay. Why do you feel that way? And what is it and that I said? Or and then I get to have a conversation with them, because it's not just about numbers online, right? It's that connection. There is a person that's there, even though maybe you're being seen, I'm being seen, and that person isn't being seen. We can't see them. And it has then afterwards, I've actually have then built good rapport, good relationships with those people. Because I think sometimes also there are people who are out there online or doing, like we were saying, done stuff on television, and those people, they're not open. They are just looking like, oh, just adore me, just be my fan, instead of each person has a heart, a soul, goes through fears, uh, different feelings. Yeah, even when I don't like, sometimes when someone attacks me online, if I just come back in a positive way, not a fake, like, oh, thanks for your feedback. Really, thank you for your feedback. Or why do you feel this way? Or what was it that I said? Or what should I maybe be looking for here? It just totally changes the energy, and there's a growth opportunity on both sides. And I think that comes back full circle to everything where we are so polarized on vaccine, not getting it. Yeah. Russia's Putin's evil. Putin actually is doing a secret operation. Like,
right.
all these things. So
The way I wanted to finish this up, I was curious as to your thoughts. There is a lot of talk within the spiritual community about there being a split in the consciousness at the moment. People moving into 5D versus existing in 3D. What are your thoughts on that whole sort of conversation about everything splitting and two timelines existing but overlapping at the same time?
I feel that it is more than two dimensions. It's multiple dimensions. It is that we have all of these metaverses, these new ecosystems, not just from financial system, but in terms of art and life, and we're a longer way off from having a Ready Player One experience in everyday life. But I do feel that the digital artists who are out there, they already see those other dimensions. A lot of people who originally came into digital art and crypto and that side of things are, I feel like they are older souls who are very spiritually attuned. So it's taking that sort of that science and art, sort of like a Da Vinci type experience. And it's a new renaissance that I feel that is there. And so part of the intensity of this polarization is because we are becoming multi-dimensional. And I don't think that it's just two crossing between these two. Maybe for some people, depending on where they're at within their spiritual awakening, with their consciousness, for some people, it could be maybe even a sort of an infinite amount. And that's just more manifestation of different realms coming in, manifesting into the physical. So that is a lot of the growing pains that we are going through. But I feel like it's ultimately, some people are very tech and open to this stuff. For other people, energetically, it's just going to fry them. So it's intense. But I do want to say that the positive things, that I do see a bright future overall. I do believe that humanity overall is more good than evil, and that I do believe very much in the power of prayer and meditation, and for us not to underestimate that when we really set those positive, not just like, oh, I wish we'd all just get on, or oh, we'll just have an easy transition into this, because some people rightly talk about ascension, we're just going to leave the planet and all this stuff. And I think it's all about integration, and it's about connection, and and if we're really intentional and saying, I really want us to I want to move through fear, I want to experience love, and with those who are ready and for those who aren't, I'm here. And for that, my intention is to have compassion for those people. And where I feel angry or frustrated that someone is still a child spiritually, I'm going to forgive them, and go through that, consider that inner critic, that inner teacher comes forth from fear. So we use our fear to activate the inner teacher and open to these multiple realities, these realms that are here, so that we can enjoy the positives of our expansion of consciousness.
I love all of that. And I have so enjoyed sitting down and having this conversation with you. The reality is we could go off in 100 different directions talking about manifestation and all the things, but we're going to leave it there. So for everybody who wants to purchase these incredible books, where is the best place for them to go and find them?
I would say on Amazon. It's insert the books. Everyone does Amazon. I mean, I know there's a number of bookstores around the world. Big Miracles is translated into Indonesian. That was pretty cool. I'm proud of that. But I think Amazon's probably the quickest, easiest, unless it happens to be in the library or once in an independent bookstore.
Amazing. So, and I will put the links to your website and all your socials in the comments below.
Joanna, I have to get back on social media again.
Right?
Get social.
Joanna, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and share all of these thoughts and tools and everything that you have. I so appreciate it. And we will have to speak again soon.
Thank you.